Hello and welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Along Flirtation Walk, released in 1935. It's the 102nd in the series and it's directed by Friz Freleng. There's no restoration of this short, which I find quite bizarre because it is pretty safe. And so I'm using a film print that was provided to me. I'm actually not sure where it originates from, so if you do know, let me know. But yeah, I'm using it for this review here, and it's under copyright, so I can't show you the full thing here on YouTube. The whole thing would just get blocked. So, in case you haven't seen this one, we start off with a dance at a local university for one of the teams for an upcoming game, and we hear the title song at that point. Afterwards, we see a fun little game that you think it's a football game, but no, it's two teams just laying eggs, and whoever lays the most eggs wins. So it's an interesting one, and we'll definitely go through it. So I'm going to now go through the short itself, but once I go through the short, because this is a Merry Melodies promoting a song, my good friend Manny Cruz, the tunes tenor, will go through the music as well. But let's have a chat about this particular short. So first of all, you're going to notice that the colors are all red and greenish. So this is once again a two-strip Technicolor short. Thankfully, this film print is actually quite decent compared to what I used last time when I did the original commentary. So I can see some more of the details, but yeah, this one definitely needs a good restoration. What I'm hoping though is that they find a film print that has a few of the missing scenes, and it's quite obvious that some scenes were missing because the cuts are fairly abrupt. I don't know whether this happened after release or whether it happened just before release, where maybe the haste code said, nope, you can't have those bits in it, and because it was so far along, they had to just cut it out, and that's that. But in case you are wondering which scenes were cut out, the first one occurs where one of the Plymouth Rock hens attempts to lay eggs, and you see the chicks emerge from the nest. You can tell that there was a bit of a cut there for whatever reason. I'm not sure what would have been in there, but the other two cuts, I can sort of guess maybe why they would have actually had these cut out, and it's to do when that black Plymouth Rock hen is finally allowed to play, because you've got that whole running gag wanting to play. We see dozens of eggs are laid, but we don't actually see the laying of the eggs, so maybe there was a bit of animation where it was just laying eggs incredibly fast and someone got offended by that, I don't know. And then later on, we'll see a cut where we see all of a sudden she's wearing a girdle. So my guess is that there was another missing scene where they were putting a girdle on her and just squeezing her so she can squeeze out more eggs, but who knows? If I was to guess, I'd say those scenes are probably lost to time and maybe destroyed, but who knows? Maybe there's some sort of a film reel lying around, mislabeled somewhere in the vault, somewhere in the world, that has the complete scene. One can only hope, but it is what it is. But if they can't find it, this cartoon would absolutely be a great one to restore, because it's actually quite fun. This is Friz Freleng, where he seems to do a lot of these silly symphony-esque type shorts, which are more cutesy and slow and all that. But then he'll sometimes do shorts like this, which, sure, he'll promote a song, but then he'll do some faster paced action, and this one's thankfully in the latter. So let's take a look at this short. So we start off at the Plymouth Rock College, who are one of the teams in the upcoming football match, and I love the music in this scene, which no doubt Manny will touch upon. And we see a dancing bit, and this bit will actually be reused by Friz on a few of his upcoming shorts, because it's a pretty good bit of animation. I quite like it. It's quite good. Great timing by Friz. I've said it a million times, he's such a great director in terms of timing, and this is no exception. So after we see some dancing, we see the Glee Club coming on to do its stuff. Confession time, I had no idea what a Glee Club was. I only sort of knew of it once that show came out. Remember that? How big it was? And then it just failed spectacularly towards the end. It like really crashed and burned, but anyway. But even then, I was like, what on earth is a Glee Club? Because we don't really have that kind of stuff here, at least by that name. But to those who aren't Americans like me, it's basically like a musical or a choir group I'm sure Manny can elaborate further, being an American and all that. And here they're promoting the song, which is Along Flirtation Walk. And we see the literal flirtation walk, where we see all kinds of lovers, and we even see some turkeys, with one of the turkeys even doing that trombone gobble sound effect that's been used in a few shorts already, starting with Mr. and Mrs. is the name. And we even see a couple that's just not happy with someone being single nearby for some weird reason. Will this character be important to the story? We'll find out, won't we? But yeah, this definitely feels like, okay, they're going to get the song out of the way, because you'll notice in a lot of these Merry Melodies shorts, sometimes they're able to find a way to interweave the title song seamlessly, and it makes total sense. But then you got other times like this one where it's like, okay, how are we going to promote the song? So I guess it's a case of, all right, let's establish the college, and it's the night before the college game, and we'll just establish that everyone's just going to have a bit of loving, I suppose, and that's that, right? But anyway. But now the song promotion's out of the way, so let's get to the game. And we see one way, in order to keep the budgets down, you can animate one half of a crowd scene and just mirror the other half. So we got half of the band on each side. I mean, it does the job, I guess. It's definitely noticeable if you're paying attention, but whatever. Now remember, according to the billboards you see in the back, remember to smoke Carmichael's cigarettes, eat Ted's tamales. That could be a reference to Ted Pierce. He did arrive at the studio in 1935, so question mark on that one. Did he arrive well after this was animated? Who knows? But I'm sure Armstrong's Anchovies is a reference to Tom Armstrong, who was the head of the story department in the 30s. And of course, he's not credited, but yeah, it is what it is. So we see each team warm up, and I like the fact that up until now, you still think it's going to be a football game. You don't know what sort of game it is. And I thought that was pretty clever. And then it all leads up to, oh, it's all to do with laying eggs. But the players come across like they're roosters, don't they? I didn't realize they were hens. It's kind of weird in that way. It's like, I don't know. Whatever. But we now know they're hens because roosters can't lay eggs. See, you can learn lots of stuff during my reviews. But anyway, and we even have cheerleaders too, which is great. Fantastic. And they seem to be males. So it's like, hey, the hens are the ones doing the game and the men are the ones being the cheerleaders. So I guess this one's really progressive? Okay, sure. Now, a highlight for me is the voice of this Coach Duck. I just love it. Just, wow. How it's just this ridiculous, angry, like really angry grizzled Donald Duck. Because by this point, Donald Duck had debuted and had become a success and started to appear in some shorts with Mickey Mouse. So we also see some more billboards, and we see one that's the Cat's Catnip, which is named after Ray Katz, the brother-in-law for Leon Schlesinger, and he helped run the operation. So at least in this short, there is a story. You know, the home team is dejected and ends up being torn apart by Coach Not Donald. And I just love the way he's just tearing right into him. It's absolutely fantastic. But naughty, we see the other team is cheating by having pool balls eaten. And we're now in the second half, so will the home team win? Let's find out. You know, this is getting kind of tense, isn't it? And those pool balls, they're now egg-shaped for some reason, and they didn't get a penalty. So that's kind of unfair, isn't it? Whereas the home team gets a penalty for having live chicks. Is the umpire or referee, whatever you want to call him, from maybe out of town and they support the other team? Yeah, well, anyway, whatever. I'm sure whatever sport you follow, you're going to have some sort of frustration with the umpire or referee, depending on what game it is. But anyway. So we see that they're desperately trying to beat the away team, but to no avail. So Black Chicken finally gets to play and hopefully win the game with only a few more minutes to play. We see all sorts of desperate measures with the girdle, hammers, and I'm sure there were other bits that were cut for time. In fact, if you look at the runtime of the cartoon, this is actually quite short. So I would imagine that the cut bits would have been at least, 20 seconds a piece maybe? I would argue that this was probably close to a minute cut out from this one, but I'm speculating. I'm just going by what the average runtimes of these cartoons were. But thankfully, After the hammer's being hit on the black chick's head, we get a few extra eggs and the home team wins. The end. Wow. Alright, I've been prattling on long enough, so here's my good friend Manny Cruz, the tuning tenor, who will discuss all the music parts of this short and whatever else he feels like. So take it away, Manny.
Bum, bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. Hi everyone, this is Manny Cruz, the tuning tenor, coming at you with the latest edition of It's Time for Manny's Music Time, with music trivia for you today. For the 1935 Merry Melody Along Flirtation Walk, directed by Friz Freleng, with musical direction by Norman Spencer. So let's jump right into this one, shall we? So the cartoon starts off with the title track, Along Flirtation Walk, and you hear it throughout the cartoon, whether it's played in the background or when you have the Varsity 3 sing it, when you hear the song being sung later on in the dance, when the ducks and the birds, whatever, they're having their little dance before the game.
Along flirtation walk, a dream foretold, a story that you'd unfold, that lives forever and never grows old. I always felt that your little heart would melt along flirtation walk.
The song itself was written by Mort Dixon and Ali Rubel. So if you want more information about Mort Dixon, I already talked about it. Please listen to the commentary for A Great Big Bunch of You. And information for Ali Rubel, please check out the commentary for Pop Goes Your Heart. Now, the song itself is actually called just Flirtation Walk, but they call it Along Flirtation Walk for the name of the cartoon itself. I mean, they say Along Flirtation Walk. And in case you're wondering what Flirtation Walk is, and more than likely Anthony already said it, but Flirtation Walk is actually a path on Trophy Point in West Point, New York, which is where the famous United States Military Academy is located, also known as West Point, named after the city it's in. And it's a place where cadets usually brought their significant others, and try to, what's a way of saying it? I guess woo them and whisper sweet nothings in their ears. So hence the name Flirtation Walk. But also, Flirtation Walk refers to the name of the 1934 film Flirtation Walk. You notice I'm running into a rut right now repeating the same thing. The film starred Dick Powell and Ruby Keeler. The same movie also contains the songs By a Waterfall and Mr. and Mrs. is the Name. And the film itself, Dick Powell plays a military cadet. He falls in love with the general's daughter. That's the character that Ruby Keeler plays. And they're reunited when Powell is about to graduate from West Point, the military academy. So, yes, I've actually never been to West Point. It's not that far from where I live. Probably, 2-3 hour drive. But maybe one day I'll pass it by.
That love will rise and light up your ugly eyes for me, only for me.
So the next song that you hear is called, the name cracks me up, it's called Don't Go on a Diet, Baby by Sammy Fine and Irving Cahal. And this is, the name cracks me up. I mean, I need to go on a diet, but nobody calls me baby at the moment. So, oh well. If you want to learn more about Sammy Fine and Irving Cahal, please check out the commentary I did for One Step Ahead of My Shadow. This is the music you hear during the dance scene. The band plays the song and all the birds are dancing and doing their thing. And I like some of the dance moves. You see these dance moves reused in later cartoons, but I think it originated from this one. So once we get to the football game, you start hearing some marches, and we'll talk about that right now. So the first march you hear is called Frat, and it was composed by John Frederick Barth, or J.F. Barth, and it was published in 1910, and that's the piece of music that you hear when Plymouth College, the main characters, the heroes of this cartoon, come out to the field. And every time I hear that march, it makes me think of the very phenomenal, funny ending of the 1951 Chuck Jones cartoon, A Bear for Punishment, where Mama Bear sings the melody of Frat to the new words talking about, Papa Bear for Father's Day. It's probably the best use of that song in a cartoon. And if you never checked it out before, I definitely recommend you do.
Let's give a cheer for Father. Let's make his life a joy.
I'll be his loving wifey.
And
his darling boy.
So let me talk briefly about John Friedrich. It looks like Friedrich, like George Friedrich Handel, the famous composer, the guy who wrote Hallelujah, amongst other pieces of music. But a little bit about John F. Barth, and I couldn't find much, sadly, but this is pretty much all I could get from Wikipedia. And he was born in 1874 and he died in 1947. He was a composer of popular music, and I quote, his most popular composition was the College March, Frat. It was used in the score of many Warner Brothers cartoons. No duh. Barth's other college-related compositions included Rooters, 1911, School Days, 1912, and Sorority March, 1913. La 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 la. I'm going to skip all this other stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much about it. All the information I could find for John F. Barth. But before I jump to the next cue, I actually have to go back because I did miss one. So in between Don't Go on a Diet Baby and Frat is the University of Nebraska March by John Philip Sousa. That's the music that you hear when the fans are entering the stadium in the beginning of the game and you see the little band playing along. Now, John Philip Sousa, the March King, and I'm not talking about the month of March. I mean, literally, he's written so many different marches. It makes sense that I talk a little bit more about Sousa in this cartoon. I was going to delay talking about John Philip Sousa for another Manny's Music Time, but I looked ahead, looking at the cue sheets for the Merry Melodies that are coming in the future, and you don't hear his music in pretty much any of the Merry Melodies that I saw. And the same thing applies for the Looney Tunes. I even checked some of them, and I didn't see any cues for Sousa. I mean, when I think of Sousa, immediately I think of probably his most famous composition, The Stars and Stripes Forever, bum, bum, ba bum, 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 bum. I mean, obviously, it's a patriotic song. We just celebrated the 4th of July here in the United States. I'm recording this 6 days after the 4th of July, and obviously, you hear a lot of Sousa's marches during that holiday as well as other holidays. But I always think of Popeye. Whenever Popeye eats spinach in the Fleischer cartoons, as well as the cartoons that came from famous studios, he would hear The Stars and Stripes Forever whenever he would eat spinach. So, here's some information about Sousa. His nickname, like I said, was the March King. He was born November 6, 1854, in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and he died March 6, 1932, in Reading, Pennsylvania. I have a lot of family that lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. Kind of neat. The Reading Railroad, think of Monopoly, that's named after that, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, please somebody shout at me and hit the comments, because I know somebody will. So, I quote, John Philip Sousa was an American bandmaster and composer of military marches. The son of an immigrant Portuguese father and a German mother, Sousa grew up in Washington, D.C., where from the age of 6 he learned how to play the violin and later studied band instruments and studied harmony and musical theory, first with John Esputa and then with George Felix Benkert. In 1867, he began to follow the career of his father as a trombonist, but later he took engagements as an orchestral violinist and served as a conductor. He also began composing, unquote. I thought it was kind of neat because I remember a few years ago, I was like, Sousa, his last name to me, I was like, Sousa sounds like a Portuguese last name. I'm not Portuguese, but I grew up with a lot of neighbors and friends that either were born in Portugal or they are Portuguese Americans. But yeah, like I noticed that his last name, I was like, wait a minute, he has to be Portuguese because I've seen people who are Portuguese descent with that last name. I actually found out a few years ago that his father was Portuguese. Actually, and this is a little information, I was reading articles about Sousa from Wikipedia, as well as the Britannica Encyclopedia, as well as the Marine Corps website. His father's real name was João Antonio de Sousa, or it was later translated into John Anthony Sousa. João is John in Portuguese, Anthony, Antonio, so on and so forth. His father was actually born in Spain, but of Portuguese parents. And Sousa's mother, Maria Elizabeth Trinkhaus, was from Bavaria, I always say that wrong, and she was German, so Sousa was of German and Portuguese descent, so I always thought that was really neat, kind of cool. Also, something really cool about Sousa is that he has perfect pitch, also known as absolute pitch. What that is, it's an ability that not everybody has, and it's something that it helps but it doesn't help in music in some ways. Why do I say this? Because I have the same ability. So what perfect pitch or absolute pitch is, you could be the best musician in the world, singer, instrumentalist, whatever, but most of the time a singer or an instrumentalist needs a reference pitch. So before they start, especially with singers, before they start singing, they'll say, can you please play the first note? Play an F, play a B flat, play whatever. The piano player or whoever plays the first note, and then you start singing. But for people who have absolute pitch or perfect pitch, they can sing a note on the spot without any prior reference. Or, for example, if they're listening to someone play the piano or another instrument, they could identify the individual notes, they could identify chords, again, just by hearing it. That's something that I have in common with Sousa. With absolute pitch, it's an ability that you're born with. It's not something that you get trained for. Now, great musicians have a really strong sense of relative pitch. Again, if I play a reference pitch, and if you could work your way around all the musical stuff, knowing exactly where you need to go, working on intervals and stuff like that, that's the foundation of being a good musician. You know where to go musically. As long as you have your first note, from there, you can knock it out of the park. So when I sing, I go back and forth between relative pitch and absolute pitch or perfect pitch when I perform. Because sometimes when I'm reading music, I go note by note by note by note. That's my perfect pitch kicking in, and that's sometimes slower. It's kind of like if you're reading a book, and if you're literally looking at each word, the dog ran through the park. Whereas someone have relative pitch, they have a sense of where to go. They see the intervals, the space between the notes, and then they'll go, okay, so this is a third, so this is what a third sounds like. Oh, this is a jump to a fifth. This is what a fifth sounds like. That's kind of like when you're reading a page and you get a sense of the words, and you don't have to look at all the words, and you just get the flow of what you're saying. I guess if that makes any sense. It's a blessing and a curse, because also, like, I'm the only one, especially like when I sing with a choir. It happened a few months ago during Christmas, when I'm looking at the sheet music, and the sheet music says we are singing in the key of F major, for example. And the organist starts playing, but he starts playing slightly higher in the key of F sharp. And for me and other people who have absolute pitch, it throws us off, because it's like, no. What I see on the page is not what I hear, and it drives me insane. And I was the only one that noticed, and I'm like telling the organist, I'm like, oh, you're not playing in the right key. And what happened was, he was playing the right notes, but he turned on the transposer on his organ, so he was playing in the key of F, what was written on the page, but the transposer made it go slightly higher, and that's why it was like making me freak out. And he laughed. He's, oh, I forgot, Manny. I forgot to shut it off. So yeah, there's a little lesson in absolute pitch. Not a lot of people have it, and there are probably more people have it than they realize, but it's something that it's really only used in music. I mean, there's probably a ton of people out there that have it, but since either they don't do music or have no musical training, they have no idea that they have it in the first place. I didn't know I had it until I was in high school. So anyway, let's talk about Sousa. Back to the article. And I quote once again from the Britannica Encyclopedia. Quote, in 1868, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps as an apprentice in the Marine Band. He began building his formidable reputation as a bandmaster of great precision through his leadership from 1880 to 1892 of this group, which he raised to the highest standard of performance. In 1892, he formed his own band, a carefully selected group capable of equal virtuosity in both military and symphonic music, in which he toured the United States and Europe, 1900 to 1905, and finally made a world tour, 1910 to 1911. Sousa composed 136 military marches, remarkable for their rhythmic and instrumental effects. They include the famous Semper Fidelis, 1888, which became the official march of the United States Marine Corps, the Washington Post March, 1889, the Liberty Bell, 1893, and probably his most famous one, the Stars and Stripes Forever, 1897, unquote. So the Liberty Bell March, I remember playing that in high school band, because my band teacher, we did a lot of marches in symphonic band. I don't know why, but hey, I wasn't the band director, but I remember playing the Liberty Bell. The Washington Post March, I played that on the piano when I was a kid. That was one of the songs I had in my piano book back in the day. Stars and Stripes Forever, I already talked about, and Semper Fidelis, again, is the official march of the Marine Corps. I have friends and family that enlisted in the Marines, and so on and so forth. And a little bit more from this article. So, I quote once again. Between 1879 and 1915, he wrote 11 operettas, which I actually didn't know until today, of which at 1896, The Bride-Elect, 1897, and The Freelance, 1906, were particularly successful. Why did I say that weird? Continuing on, quoting, he wrote at least 70 songs, 11 waltzes, 12 other dance pieces, 11 suites, 14 humoresques, and 27 fantasies. In the 1890s, he also redeveloped a type of bass tuba called the helicon, made to his specifications and eventually called the sousaphone. Unquote. The sousaphone, probably most people are familiar with if you see certain Warner Brothers cartoons. So the sousaphone is pretty much like a cousin of the tuba, and it's that large brass instrument that wraps around your body and the bell is facing outward. I know that marching bands tend to use it. When I was in high school, my high school marching band had sousaphones inside the storage, but we never used them. By the time I went there, we switched to having marching tubas. So, the guys and gals who play the tubas, they put the tuba on their shoulder and they would march with it. But some college and high school marching bands prefer using the sousaphone. And a great Warner Brothers cartoon I could think of that has a sousaphone is Hollywood Canine Canteen from Bob McKimson, 1946. The part where the dog that sounds like Joe Penner is arguing with the conductor, and he later finds out that the mistake in his score was actually a fly that flew on top of the score. That instrument that he's playing is a sousaphone. Yeah, it's not a tuba, but they're related to each other. And last thing, I quote once again, during World War I, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy and took charge of the Band Training Center at Great Lakes Naval Base in Illinois. For the U.S. Department of Navy, he compiled National, Patriotic, and Typical Airs of All Lands, 1890. He wrote 3 novels, an instruction book for trumpet and drum, and an autobiography, Marching Along. Oh, and one other thing I forgot, probably one of the most important things. This is coming from the Marine Corps website itself, or the Marine Band. And I quote, John Philip Sousa served as the 17th director of the President's Own Band from 1880 to 1892. The most famous director of the band, and then it's repeating Semper Fidelis and Star Stretch Forever. So yeah, he led the President's Own Band. And also the Marine Band made their first recordings under Sousa, since the phonograph was a new piece of equipment at the time, and they were chosen to do it. And 60 cylinders, because remember, this is before records, this was a wax cylinder. 60 cylinders were released in the fall of 1890. And I'm quoting a little bit more from the Marine Corps website. By 1897, more than 400 different titles were available for sale, placing Sousa's marches among the first and most popular pieces ever recorded, and the Marine Band one of the world's first recording stars. So that's what led to his fame and his exclusivity. Another thing, too, quoting from the Marine Corps website, in his 12 years as leader of the Marine Band, he served under 5 presidents, and the experience he gained with the Marine Band would be applied to his civilian band for the next 39 years. So on and so forth. And I could keep talking about Sousa because, like I said, literally he is probably the most famous military musician in American history. We still play his music to this day, and he's just a legend in military music, but also in the history of development of American marches. I mean, this cartoon does feature other marches besides him, but, he's the granddaddy of them all, the March King itself. So, yeah, John Philip Sousa. I made this way longer than I thought it would be. Going back to what I was saying before, so Frat is the theme song that you hear throughout the cartoon of the Plymouth College Birds, and the theme song of the opposite team, the Rhode Island Reds University, is called School Days by Robert B. Brewer. And you hear that throughout the cartoon whenever you see them coming out of the locker room and this and that. Now, I couldn't find anything about Robert B. Brewer. The only time, when I typed in Robert B. Brewer and kept looking online, I kept bringing up a soldier that fought, I think, in World War II, and clearly that wasn't the composer of this cartoon because that Robert B. Brewer was a child when this cartoon came out, so it's not him. So, couldn't find information. I wish I had access to, when I was in grad school, I could really dig deep into the library and dig around, but sadly I don't have those resources at the moment. So, later on in the cartoon, you hear Fare Thee Well, Annabelle by Mort Dixon and Ali Rubel again, and that song itself was written in 1934. It was introduced in a film in 1935 called Sweet Music that had Rudy Valley and Anne. The last name looks like Dvorak, like the famous composer. It's late. Composer Antonin Dvorak. So I'm going to say Anne Dvorak or Dvorak. if you want to say it like that. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's either Dvorak or Dvorak. But yeah, that's the lady who co-stars with Rudy Valley, and that's where this song originates from. I was listening to a really cool version of it before that was recorded in 1935 by Glenn Gray and the Casa Loma Orchestra. It's very, very upbeat. I really like the recording of it. This is the song that you hear when the game starts, when the chickens start laying their eggs. This is the weirdest football game I've ever seen. I mean, I am a fan of football. I'm a fan of American football, the Dallas Cowboys, not football as in soccer. So yeah, Fare Thee Well, Annabelle. Go listen to it. It's a really cool song. I really like it. And the last cue that you hear in this cartoon is Vermont Academy March by Clyde Dewar, and that is performed by the band after halftime. So the two teams go back onto the field, and you hear it very briefly, and you see a clip of the marching band playing it. And a little tiny bit of information about Clyde Dewar, who was Dewar, D-O-E-R-R. That's how you pronounce it. I'm going to say Dewar. We'll go with that. So I managed to find a tiny bit of information about him on the AllMusic website. And just going to sum up a little briefly what his life was about. So, and I quote, "More than one genre of music was responsible for making the saxophone one of the most popular instruments in America, a fact that the fans of jazz heavyweights often overlook. Clyde Dewar's tireless performing in the 1920s, live as well as on radio and records, was a gush of hot water into the relaxing bath of popular music associated with this family of instruments. Coldwater was the name of the town he grew up in, appropriately located in Michigan. The musical Dewar, pun, get it, opened with violin at the age of 8, but he switched to the saxophone, Simpsons reference, in high school. The stimulus was, as would be the case with many a budding reedman, reed as in like a saxophone reed, seeing someone else playing the instrument live. In Dewar's case, this was a sax soloist in a minstrel show. Oy vey. So he did get a formal education. He went to the King Conservatory in San Jose, which I never heard about. I am going to California later this month, so maybe I'll see if I can find that out. And I'm going to skip all this because I already talked enough about John Philip Sousa. I don't want to take too much time. But he had a pretty substantial career recording in the 20s and the 30s. He actually worked as a conductor as well for the NBC affiliate in San Francisco, and then he came back to the East, but his career in music started to peter out a bit. He went to chiropractic school. He opened up his own chiropractic office, and he also started working as a precision grinding. So he got training in that and started doing that somewhere in Oakland, California, I believe. And he also sold real estate. So he had a lot of careers going on. So he worked as a musician. He worked in precision tools and real estate. And he did quite a bit. Oh, and I forgot. He was born June 24th, 1894 in Coldwater, Michigan, which I already mentioned. And he passed away August 2nd, 1973 in San Mateo, California. I don't know. I just had to do it like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Why not? It's late. So these are my thoughts for Along Flirtation Walk. I really, really hope that they did a restoration of this cartoon because A, the print that I saw both on Cartoon Network and the one that I was watching recently looks awful. It's an old AAP print and it just looks rough. I hope that this cartoon gets restored because there's really nothing inappropriate with it unless you're offended by, I don't know, chickens laying eggs as opposed to playing football. But it's just the print looks awful. They've done restorations of these older Merry Melodies like My Green Fedora and I Haven't Got a Hat, Into Your Dance, and some of the other ones, Mr. and Mrs. is the name that came out on the Collector's Choice. And they look phenomenal. You know, I want to see these cartoons like as vibrant as possible. But also, and again, I think this is something that Anthony has mentioned in his commentary, but there are some 3 or 4 very awkward cuts, especially near the end of the cartoon, that are very jarring. And it's like, whoa, like, did I miss something? And I had to go back a few times, and I forgot that this cartoon has those weird cuts in it. So hopefully a restoration will come up very soon, and it'll fix those cuts, and it'll make this cartoon look decent, not like, you know, it was dragged on the floor and projected in a projector that's about to explode or something. So thanks for listening. Please follow me on social media at The Toonie Tenor, TheToonieTenor. TOONEYTENOR for more updates on my life as a musician and as a multifaceted geek. And I have to go to bed right now because I have to sing in the morning. Unfortunately, it's for a funeral, but, you know, I still have to sing. I was asked to sing, and hopefully I will do my best doing that. Oh, one last thing. Every single time that I saw the scene with the coach, and he goes, I love it. Makes me laugh all the time. And I just love what Norman Spencer does in the score that he has as a baritone sax. It's either a baritone sax or a bass sax. I'm going to most likely say a baritone sax because I used to play it. Playing the melody during that scene, it just makes me giggle every time. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. Bye.
That's all, folks.
So thank you, Manny. This one's quite fun for an early Merry Melodies. It's not going to be a go too short, but at least this one has a lot of energy that's been missing in the past few Friz Freleng Merry Melodies, where there was no question that he was trying to emulate the silly symphonies, and without too much success. Unfortunately, he does regress a bit back to the whole silly symphony light shorts with Little Dutch Plate and all that sort of stuff, unfortunately. But look, this one's fun. Between this one and I Haven't Got a Hat, at least he was having a bit of fun with these. So this gets, 7 out of 10. I had fun with it. It's fine. And hopefully this one will get restored, and wishful thinking, they find those missing scenes. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.